Where did your interest in journalism emanate from, Roger?
My mother used to work for Radio Television Hong Kong, and I grew up always being aware of the radio and knowing people who worked in radio, and so it was kind of familiar to me. I very nearly got into drama. It was a kind of a difficult decision as to whether I went down the drama route or went some other route, and eventually I gave up on drama and just messed around for several years, and finally found myself back in Hong Kong, and I was teaching English to some refugees, to Vietnamese refugees, and I just had an itch really to do something different, and I heard that Radio Hong Kong was looking for reporters. So I just went up, and they were desperate, basically. And I loved it from day one, basically.
What was your first job?
My first job was at Radio Television Hong Kong, working on radio news. I was given 1 day's training on how to operate a Ewer tape recorder and then sent out. So I had no proper journalistic training whatsoever. But I just saw it as storytelling. Radio Hong Kong at that time was manned by a couple of people who were seconded from the BBC in London. And so the radio newsroom operated to BBC kind of journalistic standards. So they had a kind of training function as well, I suppose. So they taught me the basics of reporting, how to make sure you're fair and impartial, and the basics of law and libel and all this sort of thing. And that's where I learned, and I was there for on the radio side for about a year.
What did you learn on your first job?
It was a crash course, really, because Hong Kong was a very dynamic place. There were all sorts of things going on. It was a very lively city. After I'd been in the radio side of things for about a year, I actually, within 6 months or so, they also had me news reading, and that's where I first started news reading. And I can remember being the very first bulletin I ever did, which was probably the most nerve-wracking moment of my life, just because it was so difficult. But it was a great place to learn. And eventually I moved up. They started up a youth television program there, and I got a job as a presenter, reporter, producer on that. And I instantly loved television, and it was a fantastic learning environment, because there were stories around every corner, and this program had tiny viewership. It was for English-speaking young people in Hong Kong, and very few of them actually bothered to watch us. So we could make terrible mistakes. And I just learned the art. We had someone working on the program who'd been through film training and knew the essentials of not crossing the line, about how to storyboard an item. And so we learned on the job, really, how to try and be natural in front of a television camera. Yeah, a great training opportunity.
How did you progress from there to your current role?
I left Hong Kong with a show reel and came back to Britain and hawked my show reel around all over the place. And at the time, my intention was to get into documentary making, and in particular environmental documentary making. My last few years in Hong Kong, I'd graduated to a kind of an adult documentary program, and I was making environmental documentaries for them. And I sent my show reel around, and it got passed, strangely enough, to the editor of Newsround, the children's program. And I got a call completely out of the blue saying, our reporter has gone off, is off this summer, we need someone to fill in. Would you like to do it? And I was very sniffy about children's news, TV, Newsround. It was way beneath me, I thought. But no one else was offering me any work, so I went to Newsround and loved that, absolutely loved that. And at the end of the summer, they let me go. I came and worked at BBC South for a while, but then they phoned up and Newsround phoned up and said, our reporter has moved on, would you like to have the job permanently? And Newsround is, again, a fantastic training place, because the skills you need to have to broadcast to children and to explain the news to children, sometimes very complicated adult news to children, are exactly the skills you need to do it anyway. Clarity above all else. Because on TV news, you only get one chance to take in the story. And children, even more so, you've got to make sure you carry them with you. You've got to use all the tricks of storytelling to persuade them that this is a story worth listening to, that it matters, that it's of some kind of account. And then you've got to keep them there and entertain them along the way, but tickle their imaginations. And what I really loved about working at Newsround was that you knew who your audience were. You're thinking, I'd imagine an intelligent 8 to 13-year-old. It's a very discreet little target, and I really enjoyed that.
What characteristics does a good journalist need?
I think curiosity, a real concern for the truth. I think the longer I've been in this job, the more I'm aware of how much spinning there is, not just by politicians, but by everybody. And finding the truth, I think, has become more and more difficult. So curiosity, a concern for the truth, caring about stories. I think you've got to have some dramatic ability as well to deliver stories, to make it interesting, to make it exciting, to make it engaging. And I think while I've been with the BBC, I think I've really taken deeply on board a lot of what they stand for. It's in my genes now to be fair, to be impartial, to be accurate, a concern for those things. But I think above all, and also a cynicism. I think you've got to be, this comes with, a concern for the truth, a wariness of spinning, a kind of wariness of what people are trying to tell you, what their secret agendas or overt agendas might be, a desire to really know what the big truth is in any story you go on to.
Does meritocracy exist within journalism?
I think everybody in TV knows second-rate people who've kind of blagged their way into jobs. I don't know if you survive very long like that. You can get into jobs that way, and I think we've all seen and met people who've blagged their way into jobs just because they've got the gift of the gab and they can talk the talk. But it's after a while you kind of get found out pretty quickly. So I'd like to think so. Yeah, I think on the whole, I mean, the people I've worked with, and most of the people I've worked with here, who've ended up staying here, know what they're doing. Yeah.
What's the high point of your career?
One of the moments was on Newsround when the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up. It blew up 15 minutes before we were on air. And about 2 weeks beforehand, there'd been a big discussion amongst the news world and the children's TV world about who breaks a big story if it happens during children's hour. Because there'd been some concern that you can't just interrupt Jackanory or whatever it is to say, we're interrupting this program to tell you that thousands of people have been slaughtered in it's not the way to do it. And so the principle had been established that children's Newsround, would break any stories that happened in what was then children's hour from 5 to 6. I think from 4 to 5, 4 to 5:30, I can't remember, but there was an hour there that was our territory. And this was the first time that principle had been tested. And I was sitting there in the studio. It was only the 6th time I had ever presented the program, so I was fairly nervous at doing it anyway. And I can remember Julia Somerville, who was the national adult news presenter, came into the studio, and there was a heated discussion because she wanted to do it. She wanted to, the adult news wanted to take over and do it. There was a heated discussion, and they ended up letting me do it. And I've seen it recently. Someone posted it on YouTube. You've never seen a more frightened-looking presenter in your life, but that was an extremely memorable moment. Yeah. While I've been here in Southampton, there have been several. I was heavily involved in the coverage of the protests over the Newbury bypass, and that had many, many memorable moments. But I think recently, just a few months ago, one of the most satisfying items I've ever been involved with was when they finally breached the shingle bank down at Medmary near Selsey, this huge sea defence project that's been several years in the planning. And after hundreds of years of this shingle bank holding back the sea near Selsey, they deliberately breached it. The sea came in and created this whole new nature reserve. And that was great to be involved in. That was a high moment.
Has your passion and interest in journalism remained to the day?
I've kept this passion for environmental issues, which is what I feel most strongly about. And that's remained, and I'm still very interested in, and really intrigued by the way a lot of the environmental issues we've got at the moment divide the green movement. Wind power, fracking. There are so many issues within the environmental world that are complicated. The other thing that's happened to me late in my career is that I've begun to do some court reporting, which I'd never done in the first few years of my career, and I find that absolutely fascinating. Difficult to report on television because often there are no pictures. But just as a human drama, to sit in a courtroom and try and figure out where the truth is, and figure out a way of reporting it accurately is just a wonderful challenge. Yeah.
And how do you go about trying to report it accurately?
I guess, well, with court reporting, there are so many limitations. You can't. You've simply got to report what happens within the case. It comes down to good note taking. It comes down to trying to see your way through a mass of information to try and pick and choose what is the essential information that needs to be got out. You've got, I mean, your average TV news report is what, 1.5, 2 minutes long. 3 seconds a word, that's 480 words, something like that. It's not a lot of time to tell a very complicated story. So we work in haikus rather than novels in television. It's just being very careful.
How do you strive to strike a work-life balance?
Moving down south helped an awful lot. Working in London was really difficult to achieve that. But down here, it's a fairly relaxed rota system they have down here. I work, most weeks I work a 4-day week, with the occasional weekend like now. Occasionally it is a 5-day week. I chop and change an awful lot. That is one of the things that's changed while I've been here, is that the role has changed. That I used to be just a presenter and a reporter. Now I film my own stuff, I edit my own stuff, I work as a producer here sometimes, I work as a news organizer, I plan sometimes, I do the breakfast shift, I do the lunchtime shift. So it chops and changes, which can create challenges when it comes to work-life balance. But on the whole, it seems to work. It seems to work quite well.
What are your personal interests?
My personal interests are mostly focused around my children. I find being a father probably the biggest challenge I've had in life. I've got 3 boys who are kind of teenage upwards, and a 3-year-old toddler girl, a daughter, who's come along. And I've got to tell you that being a father to a toddler at my age is probably the biggest challenge I've ever had to face. And it's pretty all-consuming. But beyond that, whenever I can, I like to go to really nice restaurants, and I like movies.
What has changed within journalism?
I think I think it has become a lot harder to find the truth. I think the professionalism of PR, the media savviness of not just your MPs, but even small-scale politicians, your media savviness of everyone in business has grown exponentially. And their ability to pull the wool over their eye, over journalists' eyes, and to hide unsavory truths has really grown in the time I've been a journalist. So I think we just have to work a lot harder to get underneath the glossy surfaces. That's certainly something. The other really big change has been the technology. I now do my own filming and my own editing, and in the last few years, the importance of Facebook and Twitter, social media, and emails, and just to gathering information about a story has grown exponentially, and our dependence on people phoning in, emailing in with what's going on, taking photographs of what's going on, that has grown enormously as well. Again, that brings challenges, making sure that what comes in is legitimate, is authentic, judging. People do try and pull the wool over eyes and send us photographs. This has begun to happen in the last year or so. Send us photographs, even innocently, photographs of lightning and strange cloud formations we got recently that looked a bit dodgy to us, and eventually we discovered, yeah, they'd been fabricated. And that's just a small example of the sort of problem that everyone's digital now, and everyone has the ability to tell lies digitally. So it has become a lot more challenging.
What remains the same within journalism?
In some ways, it's still the same job. It's still telling the truth accurately, impartially, fairly, offering that service when something happens, when something big happens, to inform people of what's going on, to answer the basic questions. What's happened? Who's it happened to? Why has it happened? Where has it happened? When has it happened? Those essentials are exactly the same. There are slight bells and whistles we can now put on in terms of telling people, but that is essentially the same thing. And on a deeper level, yeah, holding people to account, exposing corruption, scandal, and tickling people's imaginations, bringing them the new. What is new? What has happened? What wasn't there yesterday? In some ways, it's pretty simple.
What ethical and moral considerations should a journalist have?
Huge question. Okay, how long have we got? Well, ethical and moral considerations. The basic ethics is you've got to tell the truth, that you mustn't lie. And sometimes there is a temptation to ginger up the story a bit, and it's to resist that at all costs. You're there just to tell the truth, and to be fair to people, and to be impartial. It's not my job. I've really grown comfortable at sitting on the fence, and this is my natural disposition now. I have no opinions left. I am very comfortable just sitting, balancing whatever issue is in front of me. That's one of the problems I have with court reporting, is that I believe whoever last spoke. If it's the defense lawyer, I think, oh, the man's obviously innocent. If it's the prosecution, the man's obviously guilty. So I'm used to balancing and valuing the balance of opinions. and making sure that there is a balance of opinions in any subject I do. Because 90% of the stories we do, there's an argument. There's a pro and an anti. And it's being fair to both sides. That's one of it. It's being fair to people as well. It's treating people with respect. Because, going out on stories, often you meet people who are really challenging. And it's making sure that I treat them with respect. That's another principle, I guess. So it's a very, very deep question, but I think those are the essentials.
What are your thoughts on Leveson and the future of the printed press?
I find it very hard to get worked up about it. I hear people and newspaper editors proclaiming that this could be the end of Britain's much vaunted press freedom. I can't believe that that's what's going to happen. At the same time, I have a deep suspicion of politicians. I don't suspect that there's a hidden agenda here to cow the press. I do worry that if it's not framed in the right way, that some way down the line, they will be able to cow the press. The wrong sort of politicians will get in and will be able to cow the press with this little bit of legislation. To be honest, I don't have strong opinions about it. I hear a lot of noise coming out, and I haven't heard anything yet that really worries me.
What does your future hold?
Well, I'm 58. Normal retirement is at 60, but I think I'm going to go on well beyond 60. I think there are still stories. I've always really wanted to do something that I could look back and say, that was magnificent. I feel I've come close a couple of times, but that still motivates me to do something magnificent. One of the little treats I get here is occasionally some summers I've done a countryside feature series called Finn's Country the last time. There's another one in the offing. And that's a real treat. And finding new stories to tell there is a challenge and often a real delight to just find little new countryside stories that haven't been told before. I know that Twitter and Facebook are going to play a much bigger part in my journalism in the future, in the next few years. I'm going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming into Twitter, but I've seen enough to know that it's on many stories it's really useful in terms of getting information. I'm not sure I'm going to particularly enjoy tweeting, but who knows? That could well come. I think once if I ever do move beyond journalism, there's a lot in filmmaking that I really do enjoy, and being given my own camera to play with in the last 7 years or so, or to be a video journalist as well as everything else I do, I got a real taste for that, and I'd love to possibly, when I leave journalism, move into something more creative when it comes to filmmaking, using small cameras. But I mean, the great thing about this job is that it is something different every day. It's a kind of two-edged thing. It's great that there's something different every day, but also there's a kind of feeling that you only ever, because there's something new every day, you never get to go deeply into something. There's a part of me that would really like to have the same thing day after day after day, just so I could go really, really deeply into it, whether it's making a film or researching something. And so that itch might get satisfied in the next few years.